The significance of the halving, it's kind of like if Warren Buffett said, I'm going to buy $9 billion of Bitcoin every year for the next 4 years, starting on April 20th. That's what the halving is. Natural demand for $35 million worth of Bitcoin a day, every day for the next 4 years. Or you could say Bitcoin is a market where there's $18 billion of supply available, and there's a demand that's more than that, but in a couple of days, there won't be 18 billion in supply, there'll be 9 billion in supply. So if I told you I was going to cut the production of oil in half in 2 weeks, you would think the price would go up. And so that's the significance of the halving. There's not going to be any more than the 450 Bitcoin available from natural sellers. The natural buyers are people that want to store their life savings. They want a store of value and they're wanting to save their capital. And when they buy, they'll buy and hold it for a decade. Maybe they'll hold it forever, but they'll hold it for a long, long time. And a lot of them are coming into the market because of the approval of these spot ETFs right now. So they're the buyers, the miners are the sellers, or the demand is going to increase, the supply is going to decrease. The price will have to adjust to find marginal sellers that want to sell at a higher price.
Despite Bitcoin experiencing a downward trend over the past month following the halving event, this pattern is actually quite typical when considering past Bitcoin cycles. Historically, Bitcoin has often traded sideways or declined for several months post-halving before embarking on a significant upward trajectory, reaching its peak 12 to 18 months later. This cycle is expected to follow a similar path. Approaching the Bitcoin halving from a first principles perspective, it becomes evident what will unfold over the next year. This perspective echoes the latest forecast from MicroStrategy founder and executive chairman, Michael Saylor. In a recent interview, Saylor emphasized that Bitcoin demand is poised to rise steadily over time, particularly in light of the recent halving, which halved Bitcoin's supply. This combination sets the stage for a remarkable upward rally. However, Saylor stresses the importance of investors dedicating sufficient time to understanding Bitcoin as a new asset class. While the effects of the halving may not manifest immediately, the cumulative impact of having the supply will become increasingly apparent over time. Saylor even suggests that renowned investor Warren Buffett will soon recognize Bitcoin's formidable potential as a digital asset if he invests enough time in studying it. Stay tuned until the end of the video, where Michael Saylor elaborates on why Bitcoin's ascension is inevitable.
Stop, you don't have time. Don't miss out this 2025 bull run. Educate yourself first ahead of the crowd. We have created the ultimate step-by-step crypto cheat guide that will guide you this bull run. Unlock the secrets of crypto and make smarter investments today. Now by clicking on the link below to get your exclusive copy just under $10.
I actually think that if Warren Buffett had 100 hours to consider Bitcoin, if he wasn't in his 90s, if he was in his 60s, he probably would spend the time to learn it, and he'd be a big Bitcoin believer. Because Warren Buffett is an adherent of the buy and hold strategy, the hodl. He's probably the most famous hodler of his generation. He bought Coca-Cola and he still owns the stock. He would buy companies and hold them for 30 years. He said he's very famous for this phrase, if I wouldn't hold it for 10 years, you shouldn't hold it for 10 minutes. And that's the Bitcoin idea too. Buy something you're going to hold for 10 years. I think that people that get asked about Bitcoin but have only spent an hour studying it or a few minutes, they just misunderstand it. And because they misunderstand it, they're goaded to criticize it or dismiss it out of hand just because they misunderstand it. Most people that are skeptics or cynics, they think it's a currency that's going to replace the dollar and replace the banking system or replace, governments. And on that basis, or they think or they confuse it with crypto tokens that are securities. And they either think it's a scam or they think it's a threat to the dollar. If you study it deeper, you realize it's property. And once you think of it as it's a digital building or it's digital property, I'm buying it instead of buying an apartment to rent out as retirement income, or I'm buying it instead of buying a building, or I'm buying it instead of buying an acre of land because I want to store my savings for 30 years. When you think of it like that, it becomes non-controversial. And I think if somebody said to Warren Buffett, I'm thinking about buying a Bitcoin instead of buying an apartment to rent out. So what do you think? I think he would have a different reaction. Yeah. I've never met any critic that spent 100 hours studying Bitcoin. I don't think there is anybody in the world that spent 100 hours studying Bitcoin that's critical of it. Bitcoin is the strongest store of value in the 21st century. And when I look at strength, I consider the half-life of the money. And what I mean is half-life is, how long will your economic energy or your capital last? last. And if you take money, $1 million, and you buy pesos with it, and they're running a 40% inflation rate, the half-life of the money is 18 months. You'll lose half of the money in 18 months, and then the next half of the money in 3 years. So you'll be down to, 12% of your money in 4.5 years. The half-life of money, of your economic energy in the dollar, is about 10 years, because there's about a 7% monetary expansion rate. If you had the $1 million, it would be worth $500,000 in 10 years. If you actually look at Miami Beach real estate, an acre of land in Miami Beach was worth $10,000 in 1930. It's worth $10 million today. That means that it's 1,000 times as expensive. If you do the math quickly, that means that the monetary inflation rate is 7.5%, and that means the half-life of your capital in the US dollar for the last 100 years is 10 years. Every 10 years you get cut in half. Doesn't sound that bad, but over 100 years, that means your 0.1% of your money is left. So dollars, isn't really a good store of value. What about gold? Gold's half-life is 30 years. Every 30 years, you double the gold supply under the best case. What about property? Well, then it's a function of, can you pay the tax? If you can buy land and you can afford the tax, actually, it'll keep going up, in value. It'll track that money supply. The value of Bitcoin is the same thing as beachfront property in South Beach. There's only 96 blocks. No government can make more than that amount of beachfront, and that's why it goes up by a factor of 1,000. If the government could make more of it, if you could manufacture more, if a robot could make more, if an AI could make more, the price would plummet over 100 years. That's why it's cheap to buy boxed cereal, but it's very expensive to eat fish that's caught on a line by an individual or a hunter. It's things that require a lot of labor are expensive. So Bitcoin, you could think of it as a city in cyberspace, 256 blocks across, 256 blocks long, 256 blocks high. There'll never be more than 21 million. Sorry, 276 blocks is the right number. The cube root of 21 million is about 276. So if you imagine a city in cyberspace, 276 blocks on a cube, that is the immutable supply of that asset, and that's all there's ever going to be for 1,000 years, maybe for 10,000 years. Yeah. And so one day, all 8 billion people in the world want to live there. Maybe they don't live there physically, but they live there with their money, with their capital. And it's kind of like, if you could buy 3 acres of land in Palm Beach 100 years ago, and you could afford to keep it for 100 years, it'd be worth $300 million right now. But if you live in Nigeria, you can't buy the land, and you probably can't pay the tax. The advantage of Bitcoin is it's in cyberspace, so you don't have that same kind of property tax, and anybody anywhere in the world can buy it. And so it offers that immutable, immortal, scarce, desirable property for everybody in the world, and they can access it with nothing more than a mobile phone. Don't invest your money, invest your time. Spend 100 hours. Everybody in the world works 100 hours every 2 or 3 weeks, their entire life to make money. If you're going to work 40,000 hours in the course of your life to make money, you might as well work 100 hours to keep it. Once you start to study it, you'll realize that it's backed by 15 gigawatts of electricity. That's 15 nuclear reactors. That's a lot of electricity. That's all the electricity that runs the U.S. Navy. Imagine all the power in the U.S. Navy. And then you'll see it's backed by 600 exahash. That's all the computer power that Amazon, Microsoft, and Google can muster. Maybe you don't know how many data centers Microsoft or Google or Apple have, but you know that they're very valuable companies. And if I show you a network which is more powerful than them, you would think, okay, that's very tangible. You start to study all the companies that have backed it, Block and Fidelity and Coinbase and MicroStrategy and BlackRock, And once you start to see all of these organizations that are supporting it, you realize that there's a network of hundreds of millions of people, thousands of corporations, gigawatts of electricity, tens of billions of dollars of computing data centers, and hundreds of billions of dollars have been invested in this network. And everybody has one thing in common. They believe in the idea of digital money and digital capital. The world's got $900 trillion of capital, of wealth in it, and most of that wealth, it's stored there for when you need it in the future. So if I give you a lot of money, you've got to decide to invest it in the stock market, in the real estate market, or buy debt, or put it in a bank. They all have risk. Bitcoin represents a bank in cyberspace run by incorruptible software. It's for people that don't want to be their own hedge fund. Why should you have to gamble on a stock to not lose your money? Why should you have to trust a bank? Maybe you trust your bank, but what about the bank in Lebanon that stole everybody's everybody's money and froze it and then devalued it. What bank are you supposed to trust in a war zone? What bank do you trust when the currency's collapsing, right? So the world needs a bank it can trust. It needs a property that is beyond the reach of a government, a corporation, an individual. Bitcoin represents that bank in cyberspace that offers property rights to 8 billion people. You don't know it yet, but then again, you use an iPhone. Why does it work? Where does the music come from? Where do the videos on YouTube come from, right? The world is going through a digital transformation. What I'm saying is this is the digital transformation of money, of capital, of property, right? If you want to give music to 1 billion people, you need digital music. If you want to give wealth to 1 billion people, you need digital capital. You're not going to give money and property rights. You're not going to give economic security to everybody on earth without the digital form of capital. If you're an individual investor or you're a family, Bitcoin makes a good treasury asset. You can build a family on it. If you want to store assets for 100 years so your great-grandchildren are able to live well on what you've earned in your life, then Bitcoin is, I think, my best idea for that. I think Bitcoin can be used to back a company. You can use it to back a bank. You can use it to back a family. If you have a charity or a religion or any nonprofit organization, you need an endowment. The real issue is, do you want a big endowment or a small one? You want a big one. Do you want your endowment to go up 30% a year or 20% a year, or do you want it to go up 2% a year? You want it to go up 30% a year. So Bitcoin represents an endowment to my corporation. A lot of people get struck by a new idea they're not ready for. And it's scary and it's confusing. And so in my experience, the best investments, Apple, Amazon, Facebook, Google, they're investments everybody needs, nobody can stop, but nobody understands. And they're scary. Bitcoin is digital money. It's something everybody needs, nobody can stop, but a lot of people, most people don't understand. It's not any different than the first 5 years of electricity. Someone invents electricity and they come to you and they say, hey, I want you to put electricity in your house. And you say, well, my neighbor put it in his house and the house burned down. And the mayor says, we're going to pass a law making it illegal to wire your house with electricity so you don't burn down the building. And then someone says electricity is dangerous and it will kill us all and cause cancer. And then at some point they realize electricity it's complicated technology, but life is better with electricity in your house. That didn't happen in 5 years. It took 30 years. It took an entire generation. And that's what happens with new technology and paradigm shift. This is digital money. My father, he ignored the first 20 years of the internet revolution, and he didn't want an iPhone and he didn't want a computer. But then at some point, we got him a big screen television and we got him a handheld device where he could speak to YouTube and ask for anything he wanted to watch on TV. And when he could speak and YouTube gave him his favorite TV shows and favorite musicians and he could travel the world via YouTube, he started loving technology. These ETFs made it 100 times easier to buy Bitcoin, and every day $50-100 million worth of capital is going from analog to digital, and people are buying it that would never touch it. The ETFs are just a very popular application that allow rank and file institutional investors and mainstream investors to buy some Bitcoin quick and easy. It makes it 1,000 times easier for them. But when Apple builds Bitcoin into the iPhone, that'll make it 1,000 times easier. When Microsoft and Google build it into Android or Microsoft, it makes it easier. There's 100,000 different things going on. It's the market economy. And that's the nice thing about a permissionless open network. So the idea of an open network, open to all, permissionless, means that innovation, both business and technical innovation, can happen everywhere in the world all at once. And that's what makes Bitcoin the most powerful, useful, exciting, interesting thing in the world right now.
Michael Saylor shares his insights on why Bitcoin is poised to be the future and continue its upward trajectory over time. He emphasizes that Bitcoin's scarcity and increasing demand render it an exceptionally valuable long-term investment, offering superior returns compared to traditional assets like property or stocks held over decades. Saylor asserts that everyone should devote time to studying this new asset class, considering it the best in the history of civilization. With expectations of Bitcoin's significant growth, echoed not only by Saylor but also by numerous other expert analysts and investors, now is the opportune moment to take action. By thoroughly studying Bitcoin, you can make informed investment decisions and pave the way for a brighter financial future. For more Daily Dose Crypto news, check out these 2 awesome videos on your screen. Click now and we will see you on the next video.